Hello, my name is Philippa Langley. This short series of films has been done in celebration of the first 100 years of research, the centenary of the Richard III Society. It is one of the oldest and largest historical societies in the world. We hope that you enjoy them. Thank you. For what happened to Anthony Woodville Earl Rivers and Sir Richard Grey in 1483, it's vital for the background to be known because there are no official records of the case surviving today. At least their executions cannot be termed murder because they were tried and sentenced by the court of the Earl of Northumberland, Warden of the East and Middle Marches. Again, we have to go back to what contemporary records remain. Richard, as Duke of Gloucester, was Edward IV's foremost national officer and right-hand man. In 1483, he was Chief Military Officer of the Kingdom, Controller of Security by Sea as Lord High Admiral, and on land as High Constable of England, and Lieutenant General of the Army. On certain occasions, the local militia and town's men-at-arms would be set on high alert in case of unrest. An interregnum, such as followed Edward IV's sudden death, was just such an occasion, when unrest might be expected and travel by road might be hazardous. The new king, Edward V, was due to travel from Ludlow to London with an armed escort. Hastings, already stirring up trouble against the Queen, Edward V's mother, Elizabeth Woodville, and her family, heightened tension by making threats unless Edward V's escort was limited to 2,000, a figure he estimated would be matched by the numbers he thought Richard of Gloucester and the Duke of Buckingham would be travelling with. Richard of Gloucester, moving south from York with 300 men in mourning for Edward IV, was receiving updates and realising what was happening in London, where the King's Council, held by the Queen in his absence, had denied him the office of Protector of the Realm, as stipulated in Edward IV's will, and placed members of her family in charge of military actions. And this was usurping Richard of Gloucester's powers. A rendezvous had been arranged at Northampton between the King's party, Buckingham's party, and Richard of Gloucester's party, so that all could enter London together. The King's party, led by the Queen's brother, Earl Rivers, snubbed the royal dukes and the town's royal welcome for the new king, bypassed Northampton and pressed on to London, leaving the dukes to catch them up. So Rivers, who'd been appointed by Edward IV in charge of Edward V's movements, went back to Northampton with his party, leaving the king further on the road in other hands. Richard of Gloucester, recognising the royal snub and aware of what was happening in London to undermine his powers, suspected trouble. Following the arrival of the Duke of Buckingham in Northampton, Gloucester detained Rivers in the town and made haste to then catch up with Edward V. On the road, as he neared the King's party, he encountered the Queen's son, Sir Richard Grey, who had come up from London with a company of men. And this exceeded the King's agreed escort limit of 2,000. Gloucester is reported to have said that this was part of a conspiracy to waylay and ambush him on the road, but whether he or someone else, like Buckingham, did make this charge is not known. Now there were 4 separate forces of men-at-arms in one wayside place at Stony Stratford, which had no accommodation for armies such as existed at Northampton, namely Edward V's escort, Richard of Gloucester's retinue, Buckingham's retinue, and Richard Grey's men, a mingling of men that could be out of control. As Lord High Constable in charge of bodies of men-at-arms, Richard of Gloucester took charge and dismissed all but his and Buckingham's men. A contemporary account estimating the number of men with Richard of Gloucester and Buckingham to be 500. Gloucester and Buckingham brought Edward V back to Northampton with Grey and others under arrest. Gloucester sent the detainees to his northern castles, and the 2 dukes escorted Edward V the rest of the way to London. It was reported that no bloodshed took place. As High Constable, had Richard of Gloucester wished to murder Rivers and Gray, he could legally have held an ad hoc constable's court in the field, accused them of a trumped-up charge, and had them executed on the spot. What did take place was the detainees remained held for the next 8 weeks, which suggests he wanted to use them as leverage to bring the Woodvilles to accept their loss of power, as they had expected Gloucester to accept his loss of power. But they refused to reach an accommodation and instead started agitating against the government. This sealed the fate of Rivers and Gray, and they were sent to Pontefract, where they were tried by the Earl of Northumberland and executed for treasonous conspiracy. So thank you for watching. We hope that these have been helpful, and if you want to find out more about any of these subjects, please visit the Richard III Society website. Thank you.